Today I'm going to talk to you about the decline of unions in the United States since the 1980s. I'd like to raise awareness to this situation because I think that it plays an important role with maintaining the middle class. First, it's important that we look at the history of unions. They're very tightly woven in the history of the United States. And if we look back at some of the most monumental times of our country, unions held strong during those times and created good work environments for those in those times and kept those work environments for us today. The first successful strike was in 1791. It was by carpenters in Philadelphia who were demanding a 10-hour workday. From there, the formation of unions kept excelling, and when the Industrial Revolution and Civil War were happening, they became very strong because our country was building things a lot faster than the amount of people and the amount of time that we could allocate towards them. So people were being overworked and they were being put in very poor working conditions. So people formed unions to make sure that people were being treated more fairly and fought day and night, strike after strike, to establish these as hopefully laws. The National Labor Union was created in 1866, and this was the first national labor federation in the United States. Later, the Clayton Antitrust Act provided further clarification on topics such as price discrimination, price fixing, and unfair business practices. The Fair Labor Standards Act was passed in 1938, and this is a federal law that establishes minimum wage, overtime pay, eligibility, record keeping, and child labor standards. So if we look at the timeline of the success and the setbacks of the union, they correlate with financial struggles that our country has gone through as a whole. To begin with, they were formed during the Civil War, and through World War I, they were the strongest. They declined during the Roaring 20s, considering that the economy felt they didn't need them as much. They were woken up quickly, though, with the Great Depression following, and they started to become strong once again, making sure that people were getting paid fairly and that they could make ends meet. World War II kind of prevented people from putting out strikes that they really desired to. They wanted to stand up for themselves, but because of the situation, they almost felt like it was unwise and would set back their country from succeeding in an even bigger picture. But right after World War II, all of these frustrations came out immediately through different strikes and through different protests. Once inflation struck the United States, it was caught off guard and people took it very negatively. They weren't expecting it to happen, considering what else was going on with the country at the time. There's a quote that says, "It was considered an evil which must not be tolerated, a cruel tax on people who live on fixed incomes." This was quoted from the CED, 1958, page 11. And since then, the unions have begun a drastic decline. That was around the 60s, and it really became clear that they were starting to decline in the 1980s. So it's important to understand the pros and cons of the unions. That way you can better understand them. Pros of a union would be higher wages. It would also be the benefits offered to the workers, and furthermore, the benefits that would be extended to workers' families. They also have a better access to retirement funds. And worker protection is high. It's not like an at-will employer who can fire you for any reason that they see fit. When you're part of a union, there has to be a justified reason to be terminated from your position. It also creates opportunities to negotiate frequently between employers and employees, and this keeps the communication open, and it ensures that the working conditions will make both ends happy and comfortable. Some cons of the unions are that seniority trumps experience and education. People who are there for a really long time won't be moved from their position as quickly as someone who has only been there for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, even if they're more experienced or have a higher level of education. Another downfall is that it does require fees and some ongoing things that you have to pay in order to be part of the union. It may also require some initiation fees. Labor unions may also participate in activities that disagree with the workers and their morale or their ethics. This really isn't as prevalent as what it once used to be. Since the Employee Free Choice Act was presented, it has not been passed officially, but doesn't seem to cause that much of a problem. Strength in numbers is a really great aspect of the unions. Some people feel that it creates groupthink and that it strips away people's individuality. They don't have layoffs in the union, but they do call it bumping, where someone is going to get moved from one position down to the next. That also is based on seniority most of the time. And another con may be that they are viewed with a poor reputation, although a lot of statistics show that the country is divided basically half and half, or it's seen as a third are strongly for unions, a third are strongly against, and then a third are indifferent. They don't really care either way. The last con could be that the labor unions are a hierarchical environment. More non-union people have been statistically proven to say that they feel they work in a more open and trusting environment than people who are part of the union. So there's 3 things that may contribute to the decline of unions. One of them being that the exports in manufacturing are not what they used to be in the United States. Products such as steel, paper, automobiles, those types of things aren't in as high of a demand as what they used to be, which means we require less people to be working, and with less people working, it's easier to make sure that people are getting treated fairly. We also have state and federal laws in place that make sure that all of the things that the unions fought for and established for us are now, as a whole, as a country, we follow those guidelines, and they are, you can call OSHA if anything is going wrong for your safety or your health on your work environment. You can easily go after your employer if they aren't paying you for overtime or considering any poor treatment. A third reason they may be declining is that the shift in culture is changing. People aren't as proud to be blue-collared workers as what they once used to be. When we have Labor Day parades, you don't see people wearing their union colors or their union clothes. It's nothing that people really flaunt around anymore. It's just a shift in culture, and unfortunately it may be removing the middle class as a whole, because with unions it gives that foundation of setting standards for the rest of non-union companies, making sure that people have a standard of what they should be getting paid and how they should be getting treated. And the less unions are around, I think the less we will be treated as fairly and paid as efficiently and appropriately as what we desire. So I think the spread of unions needs to happen. I don't think that the decline should be encouraged, and the middle class will rise up and flourish once again and bridge the gap of the poor and the 1%.